What's going on, guys? Ted from Immersion here, and we're back with another top 10 video. You guys seem to really come out for the top 10 magic items, so I thought I'm going to do a bunch more of these. We're going to do a whole bunch of different Dungeons & Dragons topics, but this one is my top 10 campaign-specific magic items. So what I mean by that is items that are not contained in basically like the Dungeon Master's Guide or Xanathars, essentially. Something that was included in either a campaign setting or a pre-written campaign, as if you don't know, several of them have their own unique magic items. So if you're curious what those are or what I'm talking about, stay tuned. Number 10. Number 10 is the Insignia of Claws, and this was included in Hoard of the Dragon Queen, was where it originated. And what this magic item does, I mean, it has, you can take the concept and apply it to pretty much anything, but while wearing this insignia, you gain a +1 bonus to the attack rolls and damage rolls you make with unarmed strikes and natural weapons. Those attacks are considered magical. So why this is really good is, one, this is one of the only items in the entire game, as far as I'm aware thus far, that improves unarmed strike, both attack and damage rolls. So if you're a monk and you want to have some sort of improved damage, the really only way to get that as a monk is to use a monk weapon, like a +1 or a +2 monk weapon, to get that boosted damage output. But if you're purely an unarmed fighting only monk, this is the only item that does that. It also takes natural weapons and makes them magical. So for your druid, this would be one. For your moon druid, this would be a way to get a bonus to the attack and damage rolls of any of your wild shape forms. For your non-moon druids, this is a way to make those attacks be magical and boost them as well. And there's no reason you couldn't give this to, let's say you're a ranger or some other, through some form of something, you have a companion or a pet or a summon, Find Steed, Artificer, whatever, and you want to give them a bonus to attack and damage for their natural attacks. This is the way to do it. It's unfortunate that there isn't more items like this to boost the idea of unarmed strike damage, especially for classes that aren't even any of the ones that I've mentioned, just someone that wants to be focused on punching people. This is the only way to do it. Number 9. Number 9 is the Robe of Serpents. This item is, I realized I didn't say it before, Insignia of Claws was non-attunement. Robe of Serpents is attunement. It is an uncommon magic item. Insignia of Claws was uncommon as well. This one was found in Storm King's Thunder. And I don't know, I just really like the concept of this item. I've given it to players in a couple of different campaigns, and no one's ever used it. It kind of bums me out. But a Robe of Serpents is a stylish silk garment that is popular among wealthy nobles and retired assassins. Basically, when you get it, roll 1d4, and it is emblazoned with these 1d4 plus 3 stylized serpents. And as a bonus action on your turn, you can transform one of the serpents from the robes into a giant poisonous snake. The snake falls from the robe, slithers to an unoccupied space next to you, and acts on your initiative count. You can tell friendly creatures from hostile and attacks the hostile ones. It disappears in a harmless puff of smoke after 1 hour, or when it drops to 0 hit points, or if you dismiss it. Once detached, it can't return to the robe. When all the snakes have fallen off, it becomes a non-magical garment. And a giant poisonous snake is only a CR 1/4, but at low levels, and depending on what you're dealing with, a giant poisonous snake is pretty awesome. And I feel like that I really like the idea of the noble or the assassin, like the snake drops off and like slithers into a house and goes and like takes out a target or something like that. Also, it's probably, I would imagine, not too, depending on how your DM treats it, but not too traceable. Like if they kill this snake and it dissolves into a puff of smoke, I mean, people, I guess, in a world full of magic can believe anything, but the fact that it came from a robe, I feel like it's, I don't know, harder to believe than like, oh, it's probably someone summoned it with some, like a druid or something like that, not someone's snaky robe attacked me. I don't know. I just really like the item. Number 8. Number 8 is the Ghost Lantern. This is a rare magic item, requires attunement, and this was found in the Tomb of Annihilation pre-written campaign. So I really like the concept of this because it does a lot of cool things, especially to someone who doesn't have certain cantrips. This could be a big help. So while holding the lantern, you can command. So essentially what it is it's a lantern that has a spirit trapped inside it. While holding the lantern, you can command the spirit as a bonus action to shed bright light in a 30-foot radius and dim light in an additional 30 feet. So act as a lantern. But while holding the lantern, you can use an action to order the spirit to leave the lantern and duplicate the effects of the Mage Hand spell. The spirit returns to the lantern when the spell ends. So now you have access to Mage Hand and a lantern, and it's magic. If you fall unconscious within 10 feet of the lantern, the spirit emerges from the lantern, magically stabilizes you with a touch, and then returns to the lantern. The spirit is bound to the lantern and can't be harmed, turned, or raised from the dead. Casting Dispel Evil and Good spell on the lantern releases the spirit to the afterlife, and then it becomes non-magical. But, I mean, it's an auto-stabilize when you go down to 0 hit points. It's Mage Hand, and it's a magic lantern. I think that that's pretty cool. I don't know, I really don't have anything else to say about it. Number 7. Number 7 should be a staple in any spellcaster's arsenal, especially if you can get access to this and your DM will give it to you 100%. Primarily for a sorcerer and a wizard, but it does have uses outside of that. So this is the Staff of Defense. The Staff of Defense is a rare magic item, requires attunement, and this was originally found in the Lost Mines of Phandelver campaign. So in this one, the particular one there was made out of glass, a hollow staff made out of glass. But it's supposed to be as strong as wood. So while holding this staff, it just gives you a bonus, a +1 to armor class. So anybody can hold this staff, and as long as you're holding it, you get a +1 to AC. So for classes that don't have access to, say, a shield and can still use a one-handed weapon or something like that, holding this staff gives you a +1 AC. So that's huge. But thinking about this for your spellcasters, you're holding your staff, +1 AC. Here's where the real benefit comes. Staff has 10 charges, which are used to fuel spells within it. With the staff in hand, you can use your action to cast one of the following spells from your staff if the spell is on your class list. That's the key point. If the spell is on your class list. Mage Armor for 1 charge or Shield for 2 charges. No components are required. The staff regains 1d6 plus 4 charges daily at dawn. If it expends the last charge, roll a d20 on a 1, it's destroyed. So that's pretty awesome. Not only holding it give you a +1 AC, but also it lets you cast Mage Armor for 1 charge and Shield for 2 charges. So potentially, you can get your Mage Armor, your daily Mage Armor, which you should more or less typically have if you're a caster, right? It's not a bad expenditure for an 8-hour spell. So that's 1 charge. So that gets you down to 9, and then you could do 3 or 4 more shields. You could do 1 Mage Armor and 4 shields a day without touching your spell slots and still never risk destroying the staff. And again, it states that if it's on your class's spell list. So for things, I think, I want to say Forge Cleric possibly, and Hexblade have shield as spell options. So that technically means they could use this as an option for them. Or if you multi-class and it's on your spell list now for one of your classes, this becomes a viable option. This is, again, in my mind, the standard staff for the Arcane Caster, specifically, again, Sorcerer and Wizard, because they have access to those spells regularly. But if you can get this, your defensibility just increased a ridiculous amount. Number 6. Number 6 is Galder's Bubble Pipe. Some of you may be saying to yourself, what the hell is Galder's Bubble Pipe? Who is Galder? There's a bunch of really, really cool magic items contained within a supplement that was released called The Lost Laboratory of Kwalish, which is where this is from. The name Kwalish may seem familiar, as that is the apparatus of Kwalish, the kind of crab-like tank magic item contained in the Dungeon Master Guide. This Lost Laboratory has a bunch of new spells, as well as some really badass magic items. But one of my personal favorites is Galder's Bubble Pipe. Finely carved pipe blows odorless bubbles instead of smoke when used. It has 3 charges and regains them all at dawn. I should say it's a rare item that requires attunement, and there is no downside to using all the charges. So you have your bubble blowing pipe. You can spend 1 charge to cast Fog Cloud as an action, 2 charges to cast Misty Step as a bonus action, or 3 charges to summon a Steam Mephit as an action. The Mephit is friendly to you, obeys your verbal commands, and acts on its own turn in the initiative order. It disappears in a harmless puff of smoke. Puff of steam after 1 minute, or it ends its turn more than 60 feet from the pipe. So you could spend all 3 charges and get yourself a little minion that is immune to both fire and poison, has dark vision, can speak a couple different languages, and has some combat usability a little bit, not too much. Or the Fog Cloud spell, always a great thing for obscuring an area, sneaking into places. And you know what? Having access to Misty Step is never a bad thing. I can never think of a scenario where having an ability to teleport 30 feet as a bonus action is not a bad thing. And you get to use a pipe, right? You get to have a cool pipe and it blows bubbles. And people be like, a lot of times people associate the bubble blowing pipe with being childish and not useful, and it doesn't really serve the purpose of a pipe. But this one has cool magic abilities. So, I don't know. I would recommend Lost Laboratory of Kwalish if you haven't checked out what's in it. Number 5. Number 5 is the Bracers of Flying Daggers. This is from Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Their attunement, it is a rare magic item, and these are wielded by everyone's favorite knave / leader of one of the best mercenary bands in the world, at least in favorite anyway, Jarlaxle Banry, or however you want to pronounce his name. This armband appears to have thin daggers strapped to it. As an action, you can pull 2 magic daggers from the bracer and immediately hurling them, making a ranged attack with each dagger. A dagger vanishes if you don't hurl it right away, and the daggers disappear right after they hit or miss. The bracer never runs out of daggers. So, I've dealt with other items. There are items like this that exist in a lot of homebrew settings that let you create daggers and throw them, or bring daggers back to your hands. So what's cool about this is, 1, it's an official D&D magic item. It is a source of unlimited throwing daggers, and they are magic. So what happens is, what's cool though, is as an action, you pull 2 daggers out, and you throw them immediately. So you get to make 2 attacks for 1 action, with ranged attacks with each dagger. It doesn't specify the range. I'm assuming it's a regular dagger range just based on that. This obviously doesn't had a lot of use for someone like, say, a barbarian or a paladin or a fighter. Someone who has multiple attacks, this is less useful because it's your whole action. Or say like a level 11 fighter could make 3 attacks as an action. This lets you make 2, but say for your rogue or your non-valor or swords bard, this could be a big deal because as an action, you now get to make 2 attacks. So that's, especially for your rogue, 2 thrown daggers, that's 2 chances at sneak attack. That's just as your action, and then you could potentially do an offhand attack as a bonus action, depending on how that works. Though that may not work with this one, because if you have daggers that you're summoning to your hands, you don't necessarily have an offhand dagger, but I feel like I would allow it in my campaign. But the concept, it's always done well in the books, is that Jarlaxle's just throwing daggers constantly. And if you could throw 2 daggers every 6 seconds, or maybe 3 daggers every 6 seconds with an offhand, you can get that image of just unlimited daggers being thrown. And I don't know, it's just a really cool item for anyone who wants to be that thrown weapon rogue. Number 4. Number 4 is the Illusionist's Bracers from Guildmasters Guide to Ravnica. I'll be honest, a lot of the time I forget that Guildmasters Guide to Ravnica even came out. You can see it when I talk about the Everon campaign setting. But one thing that I haven't forgot about in Guildmasters Guide to Ravnica is the magic items. There are a ton of really good magic items, and I actually struggled with not including a ton of them on this list. I actually looked into doing a top 10 Ravnica items, but there wasn't enough to really go that route. So, very rare, requires attunement by a spellcaster. What do these bracers do? Well, 1, While they're equipped, they enable you to cast multiple minor illusions at once. So it doesn't actually, they were originally, oh, sorry, that was the original purpose. They enabled the creator to create multiple minor illusions at once. However, the power extends beyond that. What they actually do is while wearing the bracers, whenever you cast a cantrip, you can use a bonus action to cast the same cantrip a second time. Think about that, right? Bonus action, whenever you cast a cantrip, you can use a bonus action on the same turn to cast a cantrip a second time. Now, this clearly has a lot of cool usability, but let's talk about what makes this bananas. Your Warlock with Agonizing Blast. You're casting Eldritch Blast, doing 3 or 4 beams, depending on what level you are. So you're a level 11 Warlock. You're casting Eldritch Blast. You do 3 beams. If you have Agonizing Blast, that adds your Charisma modifier to each beam. And then as a bonus action, you get to do that again. I realize that that's really good. But 2, this, in that particular scenario, is really putting you down that rabbit hole of the Warlock being just a machine for Eldritch Blast. Which, a lot of the times, that's what you do as a Warlock. You just cast Eldritch Blast. But that makes it that much better. Again, it also has benefits for any of the spellcasters that have damaging cantrips, right? If you have a cantrip, or you have a bonus to a cantrip's damage, whether you be more of a spellcasty focused cleric or a sorcerer or an evocation wizard, anyone that does extra damage and you don't want to spend spell slots, this potentially makes your turn a little bit stronger without you having to tap into your actual magic. But you could, say use something like Guidance as a cleric or a druid and cast Guidance twice onto people because they're going to make skill checks, It has a lot of utility. The Warlock is the one that really comes to mind, is how powerful it can be to cast back-to-back cantrips. Number 3. So for number 3, we're heading back to Ravnica with Sunforger, a rare Warhammer weapon. Requires attunement. It is a +2 Warhammer, so right off the bat, that's great. +2 weapons go a long way in combat. That static +2 to hit and +2 damage, great. But what's really cool about Sunforger is as an action, you can throw the weapon 120 feet to a point you can see. When it reaches that point, it vanishes in an explosion, and each creature in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on that point must make a DC 15 dexterity saving throw, or take 66 fire damage on a failed save, or half on a success. Afterwards, you can use an action to cause the weapon to reappear in your empty hand. You can't cause it to explode again until you finish a short or long rest. If you don't call the weapon back to your hand, it reappears at that point where it exploded when you are no longer attuned to it or within 24 hours. So, I don't know, I just really like, this is a really cool magic item. A +2 Warhammer, like I said, is a great boon to any melee character at all. But the ability to throw it and basically do a smaller version of a fireball, it's basically the range of a fireball, the radius of a fireball, but 2d6 less fire damage than a fireball, with a static saving throw of DC 15. So, I don't know, I just think it's really cool because this could potentially give one cool, big, bursty range option to your melee character. Plus, who doesn't want to throw a hammer and watch it blow up? Number 2. So number 2, we're taking a trip to Waterdeep, a Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And this is the Shield of the Uven rune, which is a very rare magic item that requires attunement. I will say that, it is a very rare magic item that requires attunement, so keep that in mind, as this is pretty powerful. If you're unfamiliar with the rune-based items, they were very popular in Storm King's Thunder. Essentially, you get an item that has a rune carved in it. The rune has magic, and then there's also the ability to trace the rune on something else to transfer the magic, although it's usually never as good as what it was on the original one. This one happens to be a shield, which makes it in and of itself better than all of those other ones, because it's a shield as the base, so transferring it, like normally you have to transfer it from something to a shield. So this shield is basically an ancient white dragon scale, which first of all, super badass as far as an item goes, because now you have a shield that looks like a big dragon scale. And the rune on it is Uven, which is giant for enemy. What do you get when you wear this and attune to this shield? Immunity to cold damage. I don't think I need to talk about how great that is. Next, you get Deadly Rebuke. Immediately after a creature hits you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to deal 3d6 necrotic damage to that creature. They hit you, you deal them damage, no save, 3d6 necrotic damage. Starting right now, you could stop right now and this item would be amazing. But there's one more thing. Bane. You can cast the Bane spell from this shield with a DC of 17. It does not require concentration and it lasts for a minute. And you can do it again once you finish a short or long rest. So once a short rest, basically, you can get a DC 17 Bane spell that does not require attunement, on top of reactionary damage and immunity to cold damage. Lastly, it has the Gift of Vengeance, which was that transferal thing I was talking about. Basically, you trace it onto a weapon with one finger. It takes 8 hours. They have to be next to each other, and then the shield will be destroyed, and the magic rune will be etched onto the sword. This then becomes the sword becomes a rare magic item that requires attunement, and it is a +1 magic weapon. However, it is treated as a +3 magic weapon if you're using it against one of the following creature types: aberrations, celestials, constructs, dragons, elementals, fae, fiends, giants, or undead. I believe that's every type of enemy other than beast, humanoid, and monstrosity. So it's more or less going to be, I guess, plants too. So for, I'd say, 85% of the creatures you're going to fight, it's going to be a +3 weapon, which is pretty powerful, but I think your best benefit is to just keep it as a shield. Number 1. Number 1 is the Wand of Viscid Globs, a rare magic item that requires attunement found in the Out of the Abyss campaign. I love this magic item, and it is, I would say, largely biased because of my love of the Drizzt novels, and specifically, we already talked about Jarlaxle once before. This is a magic item made extremely popular by him in those books. So this is a wand crafted by Drow. It has 7 charges. While holding it, you can use an action to expend one of its charges to cause a small glob of viscous material to launch from the tip at a creature within 60 feet. You make a ranged attack roll against that target. The bonus is equal to your spellcasting modifier, or your intelligence modifier if you don't have a spellcasting modifier, plus your proficiency bonus. So spellcasters will get a big use out of this, or anybody with a high intelligence. On a hit, so part of the reason I also like it is, unlike things with a saving throw, I feel like you have more control when you roll to hit. I know that may be all perceived, but if I roll to hit something, I feel like if I don't hit it, that's a failure on me. Whereas if I make the character roll, then I feel like it's out of my control. Plus, there's also a lesser chance, not that it comes up too often, but like if your DM's fudging rolls to make it so you can't hit things, if you do the rolling, then you'll know whether you hit or not. But anyway, on a hit, the glob expands and dries on the target, which is restrained for 1 hour. At any time, the viscous material cracks and falls away. Applying a pint or more of alcohol to the restrained creature dissolves the glob instantly, as does the application of oil of Etherealness or universal solvent. The glob also dissolves instantly if exposed to sunlight. No other magical processes can remove the viscous material until it deteriorates. It regains 1d6 +1 charges daily at midnight. And same thing, if you lose the last charge, roll a 20 on a 1, it disappears. A wand of viscid globs is destroyed if exposed to sunlight for more than 1 hour without interruption. So it's a typical drow item. But I don't know, I think it's just awesome that you can restrain people for an hour if you hit them. And, stick them to a wall, stick them wherever. They can't move at all. They can still attack at disadvantage, but if you're trying to just hold people up so they can't get to you or they don't have a ranged option, they're just stuck. I use this to very good extent in one of my campaigns, in a game I was playing in, rather, where I stuck a bunch of moving statues to a wall so they couldn't move or attack or do anything because they didn't have ranged abilities. All they had to do was run over and attack you, so I stuck them in their little alcoves. Anyway, guys, this is a top 10 list. I don't feel like I have to say this, but apparently I do based on other comments. This is a top 10 list. This is my top 10 list. of campaign-specific magic items. It's my opinion. I think they're really great. You may have a different list, and I'd actually love to hear what your list is. Go ahead and leave it in the comments down below. Let me know what other ideas you guys have come up with that you think would be interesting for top 10s. So far on my list to come in the future is top 10 second and third level spells, as well as top 10 common magic items, and then top 10 items specific to each class have all been suggested thus far. But if you have any other suggestions, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time.